Hi friends, Molton here. So after getting my first IM norm, I was definitely highly motivated on seeking the rest, and I managed to get my second one fairly quickly in a tournament overseas whilst traveling in the Netherlands called Halkaveen. It's also where I met some of my chess idols including Mamadarov and Judith Polgar in person, which was very exciting. I've gone through and chosen some of the key moments from this particular event for me, which I felt like I learned an important lesson. It was very helpful for me, including one of my first wins against a chess grandmaster. So I hope you stick around and enjoy this video. So the first position I've chosen came from the second round of this event where I was quite lucky to swindle a draw from absolutely nowhere. Here with black to move, he played the move knight takes a2. I'd already gone seriously wrong and completely ruined my queen side, and it's just a matter of time before black pushes the remaining pawns. But I had one last try here. As white, I played the move rook to a7, hoping for knight to c3 where I would swindle a draw from nowhere. So after knight c3, which is what my opponent actually played, here, can you spot the draw for white? Yeah, so if you found the move rook a8 check, king g7 and rook back to a7, that's correct, because black is stuck in a fortress here, so he can't actually escape the checks on the back ranks without moving forward, which would run into knight d7 and forking the king and rook. The knight's just in time to hop back and prevent the pawns from pushing any further. So this was a little bit lucky, but as you'll see in these tournaments, the luck seems to even out in the end. So in this next example, I believe I was playing the Dutch Women's Champion, and in this position I was fairly happy despite the double pawns on the queen side, because I'd actually managed to get this passed d pawn in the center, which I thought would be very strong for me. So I pushed d5 in this particular position, but then I got a reply which I definitely was not expecting, and that was the move queen to d6. And I spent a long time here trying to look for something which wouldn't end up losing the d pawn, and in fact white has a winning tactic here. So if you want to work it out, do pause the video and spend a few minutes trying to solve that. Otherwise I'll give you the answer right now. And in this position, white can actually win straight up with the tactic queen takes d6, rook takes d6, and the move I missed during the game, I did look at the move rook to c1, but then I thought knight e7 would stop the back rank threats, but I completely forgot that the rook here could just slide across to the e1 square, and we have a really nice back rank mate threat here, as well as the knight still hanging, so white will pick up the free piece. Instead, I didn't see this one, and I retreated my queen to c3, and I ended up losing the pawn on d5 and going on to lose this game. So the next game I'll show you from the start, which went d4, d5, c4, e6, and it was a variation of the Queen's game it declined. And for those of you who don't know about it, it's very good for white to play into some sort of Carlsbad structure, which involves capturing the pawn on d5. Most of the time black will play knight f6 instead of bishop e7, so the bishop can often go to g5, but here with the bishop on e7 we can instead play bishop f4, and we got this sort of structure where the bishop goes out to f5. This is a very normal move because the bishop is often badly placed behind the pawns. So we're just developing our pieces here. In this structure, white wants to go for f3, e4 at some point, so that's why I play f3 here. h5 was a very strange move here because I was not expecting it. Now black is going to have troubles having his king castle to the king side, but the idea I suppose is to stop the knight from going to g3, but we can still force the knight to g3 anyhow here. After the captures we can play the move pawn to e4, so it's well defended at the moment, but I'm moving the knight to the g3 square next. So we have an attack on the e4 pawn, we capture here an e4, and now we get the main move which we want in the Carlsbad, which is e5. Here we're even hitting the queen and the knight on these squares. Queen went to e6, the knight went back, so knight's heading towards the f4 square now. We have knight e4, Queen goes to e3, and we get this capture and a very good pawn structure for white. The knight comes to f4, the queen goes to g5, bishop c4, bishop f5. We're finishing our development castles, and we played the move rook to e1 here. So all of white's pieces are in fantastic positions, and we should have a huge advantage, but this is probably one of the key moments in this particular game which I remember after the move knight to d7. And now this is a good lesson in terms of avoiding moves which look good but they are maybe simplifying too much, or they don't actually help your position in any way, shape or form. This is a type of position where, okay, if we look at it, black can't actually go to the king side anymore, and he can't really go into the queen side either because he's stuck defending his pawn on f7. So what we can do is just slowly build our advantage. So we should have played the move bishop to b3 here, with the simple idea of just pushing these pawns up the board, and there's almost nothing black can do about this sort of slow plan. Instead, I was very caught up in one particular idea, which some people may be as well, and that's to sacrifice the bishop on f7. But here, as much as it looks nice to sacrifice the bishop, it doesn't actually help our position in any way, because after the sacrifice we can play e6, sure, but then after the move king g8, which is what I completely missed here, and capture, all we really did was help simplify the position for black, and this in turns just helps his king get to safety, and he has better chances of holding. So we played the move queen to e7, we had some trades, and after rook d8 we do still have an advantage here because our rook is very well placed on the 7th rank, and we did went on to win this game, but it was definitely a lot harder than it probably could have been. So this game I played earlier on in the tournament, it was my first ever win against a chess grandmaster in a classical chess game, and what I particularly picked up from playing this game was that sometimes it's better to just force your opponent to find the win instead of making their job even easier than it actually is. So we get into this position for black where I actually couldn't find a plan at all. I didn't really know what to do because we have this bad pawn structure on the king side, and our bishop is not too great either. But it's not so easy for white to find a winning plan either. In fact, I played the move bishop to c3, so offering a trade of minor pieces. So if white takes here, then I'll take the knight. The knight has no squares to go to at the moment, and it's stuck in this pin, so it's not clear how white wins this. I think the winning move in this game was along the lines of playing a4 and sacrificing the pawn at some point, and this would have created a passed pawn for white along the c file, and this was the way to go for him. But instead he played the move queen to c7, and I just shuffled here, playing bishop to e5, offering this pawn on a7 to be captured, which was not good for white because after bishop to d6 he'd be stuck in this pin and then would lose the knight. Of course he didn't fall for this and played queen to c6 instead. Played the bishop back to c3, just shuffling pieces. Queen to a3. So here after rook a1, obviously white is trying to win. If he was happy with a draw, he would have just shuffled back to c7. After rook to a1, I found an opening here, so I played the move queen to a3, trying to bring the queen into the game. Of course white should at some point just bring his pieces back and probably can hold a draw very easily. Instead I played king f3, so white is clearly trying to push the king up to the board, or maybe bring the king to the king side to keep it safe. I played the move queen to b3, hitting the rook with tempo. So if you're hitting things with tempo in general, it's very helpful. The rook is actually very short on squares, so if it goes to d3 I might play queen to c2. Otherwise the bishop is doing a good job of guarding the black squares. Queen c2, queen d6 was played, and here already white is in a whole lot of trouble because I don't think he anticipated the counterattack to be so strong, and black played the move bishop to e1, hitting the pawn on f2. And this is sometimes what can happen if you overpress and you just go a bit too hard there, but there's not enough clear winning tries. The king went to g4, and black has to move queen to e2 check. King h3, the queen went to f1 check. King h4, and queen takes f2, threatening to take here with check. So the king went to h3, we have queen f1 check, king went back, and then queen g2 check, and my opponent resigned. And this was my first ever win, because here white can't defend against this pawn, and the attack continues. Very, very strong for black. For example, h3, black has a winning move here, which is rook takes d7, and after queen takes, we have a mating threat. After queen takes check, and queen g5 would finish the game. So that was my second Grandmaster Norm, and afterwards I went on to try and get my third and final one, which was definitely, I can tell you, by far the hardest one I ever went for. And I'll talk about that in the next video. So I hope you enjoyed this one, and I look forward to seeing you then.